Good morning.
Morning. Today is Sunday, June 1st, 2025. Welcome to a meditation class. Welcome back. We haven't been here in a while because of travel and work and things like that, but happy to be here today. Let's begin by making aspirations and setting our intentions, which we do every class. We start our practice with that by saying the four immeasurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering.
May all
Beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. So I'm going to read from there's two really great Instagram pages. Pema Lotus, that's our Dharma friend, Shamel, her page, and then Jangchub.Norbu, who I don't know who does that page, but it's wonderful. So this is a quote by our teacher, Victoria Nai's Lama, Garchen Rinpoche. Don't be bothered with what others do. Do not criticize or judge them for their dualistic thoughts and actions. Just pay attention to your own mind and nothing else. Once you have become completely liberated, you will be able to help others become liberated. When you are liberated, you become like a lake of warm water, naturally melting all the ice blocks you touch. So don't scrutinize what others say or do. Just let them be, love them, be kind, and focus on your own liberation first. We are unable to let go of dualistic thoughts that label and judge because although we might be smart, our love is limited. It isn't immeasurable yet. That's Garchen Rinpoche, who's a very traditional teacher, in the Drikung Kagyu lineage. And teaches many different methods along the path, of Buddhism. And he's talking about liberation from your own karmic imprints and habitual tendencies of your mind. That's the liberation he's talking about. It's not being liberated from other people's faults and what other people are doing. It's being liberated from your own habitual mind, habitual thoughts and tendencies that arise, specific emotions that trap us, that make us unhappy, basically, and keep us keep us in a state where we're reacting all the time and suffering because of our own expectations, hopes, fears, regrets, resentments, anxieties, all these things. That's the liberation he's talking about. And in Rinpoche's teachings, they're very effective methods that he teaches, very traditional, very effective, from simple shamatha meditation to more advanced, Vajrayana practices and things like that. And where a lot of teachers, are very skilled at teaching these methods, and in modern times, people, especially people who seek out the Dharma or new to it, they want the tools to deal with the difficulty of life, the tools to deal with their stress and their anxiety and things like that, and very valid pursuit, which Rinpoche teaches, but it's, his teachings are always he always stresses compassion. Always. None of these teachings he gives, and ultimately all the teachings about working with one's own mind, they're never separate from him stressing compassion. You can't have one without, you can't have it without this. You can't have, it's like, having water without, a container or something like that, or having water without moisture, even, because it's more profound than that and more deep than that. But it's, we have to, as we're working with these habitual patterns and tendencies and things like that, that progress is not going to come. Progress along the path is not going to come unless we really infuse that with compassion, and it's also why we start the practice with setting intentions for the benefit of all beings, And Rinpoche is always talking about everything being a benefit to all sentient beings. It's never just about our own liberation. It's, we can only liberate ourselves, right? But, the intention, of progress on the path is always for the benefit of all beings. Really, really important. Because we often come to the Dharma because of our own problems and wanting to sort them out. Again, very valid reason why. But this path doesn't exist in this kind of compartmentalized way of just being another method of psychotherapy or something like that, or self-help, just improving ourselves. It's always in the context of this bigger picture. Has to be. We have to keep that in mind. The second thing I want to say, because people get caught up, and we've talked about this a gazillion times in this class, about, being a doormat, allowing people to abuse you, allowing people to, commit negative actions. It's not about allowing that to happen. It's working with our own relationship to those things. And especially, in today's climate, politically, socially, and things like that, this doesn't mean to just allow injustice to go on. It's working on yourself in a way that your response and your navigation within this, or opposing it, or standing up against it, is done in a much more altruistic and effective way, rather than just some kind of emotional response to, something that offends, something you're against, or something like that. Sometimes we use the analogy of a skilled boxer. A really skilled technique expert, in boxing, does not want to get angry. Actually wants to make his opponent angry, because the anger fosters a loss of control. Someone like Muhammad Ali, that was his, was a great, had just immense technical skills as a boxer, loved to make his opponent angry, because he knew once the person got angry and that emotion took over, he could use that technical skill to defeat that opponent. So in a sense, it's that emotion often can cloud what's most effective in these situations. So let's not confuse the what Rinpoche is saying in terms of just like letting people hurt you or abuse you or things like that, because sometimes people get stuck on that. The important thing is to remember that all these methods that we learn in Buddhism, and methods is the teachings, the Four Noble Truths, the 37 Practices of the Bodhisattva, shamatha meditation. If you're more, someone who's taken refuge, or the Vajrayana teacher, and you're learning some kind of Yidam practice, whatever, all these methods are about working ultimately, discovering the nature of your own mind, and realizing that. And these teachings are always, infused with the idea of compassion and being a benefit for all beings. It's really, really, really important. You can't have one without the other, in a way, is what they say. So, Victoria is going to speak a bit, and then we'll meditate, and then we'll do some questions, if you like. And again, thank you for being here today.
Last time we met, we spoke about, which was a long time ago, we spoke about, we started to speak on the subject of the Four Noble Truths, which is really the foundation of all Buddhist teachings. There is no way to separate the foundational teachings from, second and the third turning of the wheel. All the levels are like the stories of a house. They all go together. If we don't pivot our life based on the Four Noble Truths, and even preliminary practices such as the four thoughts that turn the mind, everything else we do is really not going to succeed, because without the right foundation, we don't have the right view. There is no way to come to the right view unless the substance of the teaching is really understood. So the Four Noble Truths, the pillar of all things in Buddhism, that Buddha gave to us after he attained enlightenment, and then he decided to bring that to others, to liberate them as well from the ocean of samsara. So we spoke about the first noble truth as the truth of suffering. Why is it a truth? It's because it's universal. I mean, suffering is all pervasive. We have old age, birth, old age, sickness, and death. When we're born, death is already imminent. Everything that is born is going to perish. Old age and sickness, I think that's pretty much self-explanatory. And death, of course, which is included in the birth. So this whole journey of thinking about one's death, about mortality, about losing loved ones, ending relationships, etc., that's just a factual basis of where we are all the time. Samsara and suffering really should be synonymous. If we're here in this body, chances are we're very pervaded by suffering. We certainly experience it for ourselves, see it everywhere surrounding us, engulfed in it. The word dukkha, which is suffer, which is what we translate in English, the word dukkha itself is a much more complex word than simply suffering, because suffering implies a particular kind of state, something that has descended to a place of great deep discomfort. But in Sanskrit, it's much more layered, it's much more complex. The word dukkha can mean this basic state of being unsatisfied, almost a state of anxiety, restlessness, but it also implies insatiability. It's also linked to a word tana, which means thirst, and it's a thirst that never ends. We're always pervaded with thoughts like, if only I had a bigger house, if only I had more money, if only I had a more beautiful body, if only I had access to this and this and this. And then I was watching a teaching, and this beautiful nun said, well, then why do all these rich people that have everything and have access to everything suffer at least like us, or maybe possibly more? Their suffering doesn't end because their thirst and craving doesn't end. Once you obtain this thing, you move right on to the next thing. Craving is an all-pervasive condition of being in samsara. This thirst is a condition, all-pervasive condition of being in samsara. And the second noble truth has to do with the causes of suffering. The cause of suffering, Buddha said in the scripture, is craving, desire, desire for pleasurable things, and attachment. Because once we experience it, attachment forms very easily. I eat ice cream once, then I want it more, then I want it more. I want to replicate the sensuous feeling of pleasure again and again and again. And so we can see how easily we go from pleasure to attachment to fixation to addiction, how desire grows. Can start very subtle, very little. But that is the second noble truth. The cause of suffering is our attachment. Now, attachment does not arise by itself. I just want to point out something very important we always have to keep in mind. There is no one what we call in Sanskrit klesha, or affliction. The five afflictions that always go together. If there is craving, there is also aversion, because as we crave something, as we desire something, we are already afraid that we're not going to get it. We want to succeed so very much. We want to make sure there are no obstacles on our path. And if anyone comes and becomes an obstacle, we're willing to swipe them off, etc., etc. If one poison is present, that means ignorance is present. That means all the poisons are present. It's very, very simple and easy to go from, oh, if only I had a bigger house, than to going, oh, I love that big house my neighbor has. Why don't I have that house? I'm such a nice person. That's jealousy, Or I have such a great house. Mine is superior to my neighbor's. And that's arrogance. All these things are always present when the core is ignorance. Buddha said that the cause of suffering is attachment and desire, because it's kind of like the fuel, the motivating thing. But really the car is ignorance. It is the attachment to the self. Our ultimate attachment is to the sense of self. It is to the me and mine. There are two kinds of ignorances that we speak of in Buddhism. The co-emergent ignorance in Vajrayana Buddhism, at least in our tradition, we study with Garchen Rinpoche, as Michael said before. The co-emergent ignorance is the kind of ignorance where we forget our natural state. We forget our Buddha nature. At that time, ignorance and wisdom arise at the same time, but we kind of start to veer away, because that not knowing the true nature, the true reality of self, other, and all things in the world, phenomena, we kind of divide the world into subject-object. We take our cognizant side and treat it as a subject. We take this openness within which all experience happens and kind of convert it into what we take as an object. So the world is, that co-emergent ignorance is like that split of the world into this dualistic mentality. The basis of that dualistic mentality is the arising of the I. Once the I pops out there, it's a whole package. The five afflictions, and then of course the aggregates. And so the second ignorance, the co-emergent ignorance, the second ignorance is called the ignorance of proliferation. That ignorance, proliferation, is of course conceptual mind and being lost in chasing objects. This is when we no longer even remember to really look inwardly or think, who is thinking? What is thinking? What is this thinking? We're just trapped like like a fly, a moth to the flame. It's all about the objects of sensuality, of the five senses. We want to hear pleasant sounds. We want to taste pleasant things. We want to live in big houses. We're trapped in proliferating and chasing objects of the five senses. This is the time when we are so incredibly, incredibly lost. And really, the whole path of Buddhism is kind of returning home, coming home, bringing back the basis. But again, we cannot come home if we are just asleep in that distraction of sensuality. If we're asleep in that, and that dream and this distraction of sensuality is the play of the senses and of the aggregates and the afflictions. Because once the aggregates are present, we're constantly trapped. We go from one thought to the next, to the next, to the next, from one craving to the next, to the next, to the next. And so again, as I said, when one affliction is present, all the afflictions are present. Because when I have this, afflictions, and Garchen Rinpoche emphasizes this, it's a very important thing. He says it's very easy to see gross afflictive emotions, gross emotions like anger. By the time I'm willing to throw a chair at you, even I notice my inner state is extremely polluted. But that starts with a subtle form of anger. The subtle form of anger is fear. Hope and fear, they always go together. Hope is the subtle form of desire and attachment. Fear is the subtle form of anger. I hope for this result. I want to have that big house, and I fear I will not get it. And so in that path of my fearing not getting it, I will do whatever I see fit. I will swipe others out of my way. I will hurt them. I will, my opinions will trump over theirs. And so this whole gigantic samsaric show unfolds. And unfortunately, we are a part of that show. When we have wisdom, we can watch the samsaric show from the seat in the circus. We're not on the stage and, participating with the animals, walking on tightrope and possibly falling down. Wisdom is the experience. It's knowing and experiencing the world from its source, not being caught in dualistic conceptual thinking. And so, when we talk about liberation, and the third and the fourth noble truths talk about liberation and the cause of liberation. And we're not going to talk about it today, because all these are very, very vast subjects. They're very difficult to cover in, let alone in a 10-minute conversation or something like this. But let's come back to the cause of suffering, the dualistic thinking, the co-emergent thinking, and the proliferating thinking, when all we know is the conceptual mind. At that time, we don't know our nature, and we're trapped in chasing objects all the time. And what I want to point our attention to today is that, as Michael was saying, it isn't about things out there. It's not about the objects of our thinking. What we really have to work with in order to liberate ourselves and others from this pollution is we have to look inwardly. Some people desire, weapons manufacturer desires war because he will sell a lot of weapons. An angry person desires to pummel someone else, it'll make him feel better. A person that has craving for sweets, desires, to own an ice cream shop or whatever. A monk will desire enlightenment. But the point is that as long as we have desire, there is no chance for liberation. Liberation is not another thing out there. Enlightenment is not another thing out there. Liberation and enlightenment, or Buddha nature, the word truth, these are all synonyms. They stand for exactly the identical thing. As long as we have an object of desire, as long as we want to progress, we want to get some kind of a result, there will be no liberation. There will be no Buddhahood. And of course, here's the conundrum. In order to get to the other side of samsara, to swim through the ocean and to get to the other shore, Buddha uses an analogy of a raft. He says to cross to the other shore, to nirvana, to where there is a cessation of all this suffering, cessation of suffering, to the shore of wisdom, to the shore of liberation, we need to have a raft. A raft is virtuous mind, so of course conceptual thinking. There is a big difference on, in Buddhism we always rely on two truths. There is the relative truth and then there's the ultimate truth. On the relative level, the object of our desire, the object of our attachment, plays a gigantic role. An unvirtuous object, if I want to pummel someone because I'm angry, or I want to steal their house, or I want to take their wife, or whatever, an unvirtuous object will cause horrendous karma for us and those near us, for us, you know. But when we are not disconnected from others, our family will feel the suffering of the unvirtuous object of our thought and attachment. Maybe not in such strength, but they will certainly feel it, because we're not disconnected from others in this world despite our delusion. Virtuous object, when we want to benefit others, we want to study, we want to progress so that we're not useless. It's like Garchen Rinpoche said, well, we're useless without enlightenment because we really are not able to benefit anyone. We cannot benefit ourselves and we cannot benefit others. We just stumble in the dark like idiots. Of course, gradually choosing a virtuous object creates better circumstance for us, and then of course everyone who is near us, because it's like if our mind is unvirtuous, it's like a drop of poison in the ocean. The vicinity will become permeated with that unvirtuous foul thing, whereas when we're a drop of the water in the ocean which is virtuous and pure, it'll also benefit all the other beings and calm them as well. But on an ultimate relative, so this is the relative truth. This is us living in this world, being with each other, etc., etc. But on an ultimate level, if there's any kind of a trace of an afflictive emotion, if there's a trace of ignorance, of dualism, there is no liberation. And so Buddha created this analogy of the raft by saying, once we get to the other shore, once we get to the shore of liberation, what do? We grab a raft and drag it upon ourselves? No, of course not. We leave the raft. And raft is a synonym for conceptual thinking. It's a synonym for dualistic thinking. It's a synonym for the ignorance that separates us from others and creates immediate tension and difficulty, and then being lost in this dream delusional reality, which is always painful. Because just to conclude, I want to read from the 37 Bodhisattva practices. When we are now lost in proliferation ignorance, the 37 Bodhisattva practices says this about it. When we're just chasing objects, we're always chasing an object of our thought. We don't even think about what is thinking, what is the thinker, what is it all about, but we just chase after objects. And this is the Bodhisattva practice number 21. Indulging sense pleasure is like drinking salt water. However much one indulges, thirst and craving only increase. Immediately abandoning whatever things give rise to clinging and attachment is the Bodhisattva's practice. And what gives clinging and attachment? On one level, it's the habitual propensities that we've already created. If I had one ice cream yesterday, today I want to replicate that experience, but I want it to be more intense. But in an ultimate sense, in a deeper sense, it's based on ignorance. It's really based on not knowing that we're simply propelled by ignorance and afflictive emotions. So turning our mind inward, that's why we sit to practice and to meditate. Really understanding that the path is to liberate ourselves from ignorance and the afflictive emotions, is to liberate ourselves from attachment to the self and me and mine, which is like a suffering in itself. We sit to meditate to really examine the thinker. That's why we only observe thoughts coming and going. Where do they vanish? They arise from our awareness. They go back into the basis of our awareness. We really want to connect in our practice to that space that is kind of transcendent of thought, just the open awareness, bare open awareness, in which all that object thinking takes place. and really with the emphasis on looking at not the self, taking the self as an object, but really kind of like dropping the object and having thinking look at itself. But again, not as subject object. We have to relax that way of perceiving. And that's what we do in meditation. We relax the dualistic thinking so that we can have direct perception of our open, cognizant, pure Buddha nature. We all have it. The point is, first with shamatha, calming the fire down, calming the whole madness about things and the pursuit of things, and if only I had this, and if only I had more, and if only, and if only, and if only, calming that down, and then using vipassana to looking, as in Buddhism they say, looking at one's own face. We're not talking, of course, about the physical thing. We're talking about just bare, cognizant, luminous nature of the mind. Mind looking at mind. And that's why we sit to meditate. And we meditate so we can bring that into and integrate it with daily experience, with a relative level.
So with that, well, let's meditate then. We were watching a teaching by Drupal Rinpoche Rinpoche, who teaches at Garchen Institute in Arizona as well as
Chicago.
in Chicago.
It's called Chicago Ratna Shri. He's an incredible meditator. He's actually our retreat master. So people that go into 3-year retreat or shorter retreats do it under his supervision. Rinpoche, Garchen Rinpoche, brought him many years ago from one of our monasteries at Lapchi.
So he said something very interesting because we spoke about this before, of course, but one of the really big misconceptions about meditation, especially shamatha meditation, what we do here, is that, well, there's two. One is that meditation is about not thinking, which is a negative kind of thing that like Mingyur Rinpoche said, if I tell you not to think of pizza, the first thing you do is think of pizza. So if it's not thinking immediately, you start thinking. But a lot of people have that misconception that the meditation practice is about not having thought. The other big misconception is that people think their mind is particularly more thought producing, and that their mind is so busy they can't meditate. Everybody's mind is busy. If it wasn't, we wouldn't really need to meditate because we'd have these very calm minds. But what Drupal Rinchen Dorje Rinpoche said was, without thought, there is no meditation. Without thought, there is no meditation, because what we're working with is our thought. The meditation is working with the thought to see their transitory nature, to see their empty nature, to see how it's just projections from our own side, and to be able to work with those to allow them to dissipate, to lessen their power and the control over us and things like that. So it's in the working with the thought that the meditation takes place, not outside of it. It's a really important distinction. With that, let's start by...
I just wanted to add, because Michael just said something extremely, extremely important. The same thing applies to suffering. It is when we have moments of suffering is when we get a glimpse of our interior and we see the affliction that causes us the suffering, whether that affliction is anger or attachment or jealousy or arrogance. The moment of suffering is the reminder, and it's like the window through which we can clearly see the things that really cause the suffering. So,
right, these things, this is where the work takes place, So in the practice we do here, the first thing is your posture. So we do it seated, cross-legged, cross-legged. You can just be, you can have half lotus if you're flexible. You should be comfortable, relatively. We use a cushion. It's really helpful to have your hips in line or above your knees to take some pressure off your back. Some people can sit fine just without a cushion, but depending on your body level of comfort and flexibility, cushion helps me at least. The back has to be straight, not rigid, not too tight, and not like this straining to be straight, but just naturally erect and upright. It's kind of this relaxed tension, like the guitar string is the great analogy. When it's too slack, there's no tone, and when it's too tight, there's no tone. With just enough tension, it rings out in the sound of a note. It's the same thing. So you want your body, it's like a supple attention, a supple uprightness. The same with the shoulders. They're not like back like at military attention. They're relaxed. They're also not slouched, and the back is not slouched. The hands can rest either, it's not so critical. You can have your hands like this, down on your knees. You can have them up. Some people touch the thumb to the ring finger. I often do this left hand open and the right hand on top, resting in the lap. So that's the beginning, right? You have your back, you have your arms and legs and your hips, and then the head and neck. Again, the same principle applies. So you're not slouching the neck. It's not like uncomfortably upright. It helps to kind of tilt the head, tilt kind of the chin down a little bit, almost like the same angle as the bridge of your nose. And that's where your eyes follow that same angle. And we work with our eyes open in this class, and the gaze should just rest on whatever's in front of it, not staring intensely, not spaced out, unfocused, just resting the gaze on whatever's in front of it. For those of you who've been doing this a while, we just heard something from Garchen Rinpoche about the gaze, and said, you can try looking at the nape of your neck, which is in the back. And that doesn't mean trying to actually see it, but almost intending your gaze to go within. It's a very interesting distinction. If you can play with that, sometimes that could be really helpful, because it's, you're not gazing intently at what's in front of you. Your intention is almost towards the back, which kind of, the intention is on looking within, which is where we're looking, inside the mind. So now you're in your posture, you're sitting comfortably. The mouth. So the mouth is closed. We breathe through our nose unless you can't, for whatever reason, congestion or some kind of, deviated septum or whatever. But if you can, breathe through the nose, mouth closed, teeth slightly apart, tongue resting where the teeth and roof of the mouth meet. Let's just take 3 breaths. The breath should be natural, not deep, not shallow, just natural. Natural meaning how your body just wants to do it. You may need to take a deep breath during the meditation session to get a burst of oxygen, that's fine, but in general, it's just this natural breath that the body naturally settles into when it's physically calm and attention focused. And this is where, the practice and session of meditation begins. And what we talked about before was how without thought there is no meditation. So just sitting in this posture and breathing is not necessarily meditation. Where the work comes is, now I'm in this posture, this feels kind of good, I feel calmer, My body's kind of like settling into certain equilibrium, my breath. But then a thought comes in that I have to do something at 2 o'clock. And how am I going to get to that appointment? And, last time I did this appointment, it was terrible. And I met this person, I got angry. I'm already, 5 chapters into a story. So this is where the work comes in. The crux of this practice. Recognizing that a thought has arisen. How do we recognize that a thought has arisen? It's from mind looking at mind. Your attention, which is now kind of settled and focused, looking at the place where thoughts arise, which is in our mind. Now we've recognized that a thought has arisen. What do we do with it? We don't chase it. We don't continue the story. We don't figure out how to solve it. We just recognize that a thought has arisen, not judging it bad, good, figuring out how to solve it, regretting it, or recognizing it. And then we can go back to our breath again, which is the spot where the nostrils meet your upper lip, where the breath is moving. You can focus your attention on that space and feel the breath there. Literally say to yourself, back to the breath, when you notice the thought has arisen, and put your attention there. And then another thought will arise. Am I communicating this technique correctly? That's what I'm thinking. Back to the breath. I just recognize I'm thinking, and I'm focused on the breath again. The other technique that we use in this class is like a visualization, visualization. This thing about looking at the nape of your neck, looking within. Within is this limitless, vast, blue, stainless sky, which is our mind. The nature of our mind is that vast, infinite, calm, infinite space, but full of potentiality, because all these thoughts can arise within it, right? All these reactions, all these ideas, all these experiences, regrets, hopes, memories rise within it, but they also dissolve back into it. So if I'm sitting in my pose and I'm breathing, my gaze is correct. And again, I have that thought about where I have to go, who I have to meet. The last time we were there, it was terrible. We had a bad time. That thought now I see as a cloud that has arisen in this vast, infinite sky-like, calm, placid, infinite blue sky-like nature of my mind. Cloud is the thought, and I just watch it dissolve, leaving no trace, no stain, no blemish upon that, limitless, sky-like nature of mind. And basically, we repeat these techniques over and over throughout the session, which begins right now for a few minutes. I may talk, I may not. You know what to do. Back to the breath. It's also important to settle your mind and body into this calm. The kind of stillness of the pose, posture. That serenity of the breath, and that sky-like nature of mind. It's like settle into it. It's there. It's yours. If you feel tension in the body and just want to shift or adjust, do it and then settle back into the posture, settle back into the calm, back into the breathing. If strong emotions arise and, connected to the thoughts, or just maybe it seems like they're arising on their own, same technique can apply back to the breath, or if you're using that visualization like a cloud, maybe the strong emotion's more like a storm, but again, that dissipates, that kind of dissolves back into that, limitless sky-like nature, sky blue, infinite quality mind. You may have to apply techniques very often and rapidly because the thoughts keep coming, and that's totally fine and totally normal. Back to the breath. Watch the cloud of thought dissolve into the sky, sky-like nature of mind. Excellent. We can go to some questions. There's a Q&A button in the Zoom toolbar where you can write questions. I will say, for those of you who knew, often ask recommendations of books. On the Solidago website, Solidago Productions website, there's a list of teachers and their books. We recommend Power of Mind is a really good beginner book. And not just beginner, but advanced book as well. But it's a good for people who are new. It's by Khentrul Lodro Taye Rinpoche, who's actually doing a bunch of teachings in person in different cities. So you can go to his website. His name is on our website, but you can look him up. If any of these teachings of Buddhism is of interest to you, we really recommend that you make connection with a teacher, either online, in person. The list of teachers that we have on the website, you can go find their own personal websites where they're going to be teaching, but also they have teachings on YouTube. They have books. You can attend virtual teachings through YouTube, or watch archived teachings on YouTube. Victoria and I are students. This is like a discussion group. We're not teachers. We could teach basic meditation, but everything else we're talking about is, what our teachers say, and our own experiences with practice. But really, to tread this path of Buddhism, it's really essential to make a connection with an authentic teacher, preferably from an authentic lineage. So we really stress that. And there are many. They're teaching now, today, in this world. You can access their teachings online or in person. This is a living wisdom tradition going back 2,500 years that's still alive and present in this world, and it's been preserved through authentic lineages from teacher to student. So it's really an incredibly, incredibly precious resource. Does that mean that all work is futile? Desiring good work outcome, a good sporting performance, a result will deny liberation? No, it's the attachment to these things, right? I mean, it's the attachment to, it's not having a certain level of contentment in what we do. Without that, when we're kind of constantly trapped in desiring the next best position, stressed out because, I need to make more money, being on this kind of wheel of nothing satisfying, that's where the problem arises. It's the fear, it's the anxiety, it's the regret, it's those attachment emotions that make it, that hold us back. You know what I mean? It's not about, everything is futile. It's just the attachment to not being okay with what we have. There's nothing wrong with having ambition. I want to be a doctor, so I'm going to go to school. I'm going to go to medical school for 4 years after college, and then intern, and then be a resident. It's when that pursuit becomes something that creates suffering rather than just contentment. There's something very noble in wanting to be a doctor, or a teacher, or anything. Someone who drives a cab, and gets people to where they need to go. It's the attachment to being dissatisfied, that something else is going to make us whole. Something outside of what we already have is going to make us whole. And you have to navigate that, these, that's why we meditate. So you can start to see how we're trapped by these loops and tapes of dissatisfaction and, not being okay and not being content, and always trying to be fixed from the outer world. Anything you want to add to that?
Just as we mentioned before, in Buddhism, we always look through the union of the two truths, as it's said in the teaching, a relative truth. It's a relative condition to be here in this life for this amount of time in this particular kind of body. The relative truth, a relative level of being is always driven by karma. So virtuous activities will lead us to more virtuous, peaceful, better, positive states. Whereas unvirtuous objects that are driven and stimulated by the fires of afflictions, I need more, I want this, I don't want that, I want that person out of my way, if only he gave me this, if only I got that. That is the causes of suffering. So this is what we need to, that's what karma is. Acting on a virtuous principle of wanting to benefit others will create more positive states. Selfishness and stupidity will create suffering, unquestionably, undeniably visible everywhere and all the time. But then there's, of course, the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is that we all have Buddha nature. And so when we're dealing with difficult people, we're dealing with ourselves, we're dealing with difficult people, when we have tendencies of self-derision, criticism, etc., we have to ease that off, because that is only a relative way of seeing things floating around in the samsaric realm. Remembering we have Buddha nature, we have an ultimate capacity to grow ultimate kind of a seed that is always a part of us. You know, in that co-emergent ignorance, you know, the wisdom goes together with the ignorance at the same time. And so by turning our mind inward, by diminishing and working on diminishing the afflictive emotions and selfishness, we create positive results for self and other, and we create seeds for liberation and maturation. That's why Garchen Rinpoche stresses compassion over all other practices, because there is no antidote to selfishness as potent as compassion. Compassion is the thing that habituates us to looking at things in a very different, positive, luminous way. When we remember that others are just like us, we're not separate from them. Separation is a delusional kind of a thing. What we do affects us and others exactly at the same time. We're in a continuous dance together with the world. This emptiness, the empty side of mind, arises and moves through everything, us and others at the same time. So on the relative level, knowing about interdependence, karma, cause and effect, always working with that in mind, creating positive circumstances for self and other, always thinking of benefit of others, loosening the grasp of selfishness and stupidity, because self and ignorance are one and the same thing. This division of the world into dualism, and, you know, out of which craving and attachment, fear and hope arises. And then really, of course, always thinking about the ultimate nature of all things. The basic state of all things is purity. And when the stains, which are only temporary, are removed, when the stain of ignorance, selfishness, and the five afflictions, you know, when the five afflictions and the habitual propensities are removed, state of wisdom, state of complete plentitude, state of, enlightenment dawns. It's like when the level of the cloud covering leaves, we are able to see, the blue nature, the open nature of the sky-like nature of the mind. But even when the clouds are there, we still have to understand, the smoke and fire analogy. Even if we don't see the sun, we don't see our Buddha nature overtly and completely, but we know that even if there's clouds are there, the planet is still here intact and has enough warmth and light to sustain life on it. That means the sun is there. When the clouds cease, when the clouds dissolve, when we work on, mopping away the afflictions, the stains, the sun will be revealed. And the same thing is with our Buddha nature. It's not another object to get somewhere out there. It is by removing the stains of afflictions and habitual propensities, and removing the stains of ignorance, is that when our Buddha nature is revealed. But always operating, even in the karmic conventional reality, with this understanding, always operating with the view that the source of all things is immaculate, is perfect.
In a class a long time ago, spoke about the difference between compassion and pity. Can you touch on that? Pity always has kind of a looking down quality to it. Pity is, oh, that person, doesn't have a house, makes me feel bad because I have a house. Whereas compassion is, Sogyal Rinpoche, who was a great Tibetan Buddhist teacher, said compassion is more like respect, because compassion is about knowing that we're all, like the first noble truth, that being alive on this planet engenders suffering. So, understanding that we all suffer, not this person's suffering and I don't, and I feel bad because that person is suffering.
Also, just to point out a very quick thing is that this looking down on someone always comes from a mind of ignorance that's permeated by arrogance. It's only ignorant mind that thinks, well, that person suffers now, they're homeless, and I live in a beautiful home. Our situation can change on a dime just like that. We can have a hurricane or some storm or a fire or some whatever disaster, or we just lose our job or we get ill, and our situation is exactly the same. There is no separation between self and other. We have to understand compassion is knowing that there's no separation between self and other. Whatever plagues that person is, a millimeter away from plaguing of myself being in that same situation. Always understanding that, always knowing that, compassion is remembering that the nature of that other person on whom I'm looking down out of my cozy position is the same exactly like mine. Buddha nature is that person's exactly like all sentient beings in this world.
Someone says, how can we learn to release the attachment of believing we have control over the unknown?
We don't have it.
Yeah, that comes from, actually reading, learning, or being exposed to the teachings of Buddha. One of the fundamental views of Buddhism is that everything is impermanent. So you have to really not just hear that intellectually, but really start to see how it applies, to everything in life. It's like, I don't know if I'm going to make it, if I'm going to be alive when this session's over. I mean, most likely I will be, but, in reality, there's a possibility, we're all going to die and death can come at any moment, It's most likely I'm not going to die today, but I certainly could. And I'm not trying to be morbid or anything like that, but nothing is permanent. I mean, the house that I live in, eventually this is not going to be here. And, the boiler could explode tomorrow and the whole house goes on fire and, is gone. So that's just a matter of understanding reality. And that's part of the, a big, giant piece of the pie in Buddhism is impermanence and the truth of that.
And also, just really think into what this means, control. What fuel is it powered by? Is it by your anxiety, your fear, your hope? Those things really have to be let go, because the truth of the matter is, pleasant things will be substituted by unpleasant things. This moment that's pleasant or neutral could be super quickly substituted by a difficult moment. Our life is this constant roller coaster of change. as Michael said, impermanence and interconnectedness. The place we live in, if we are at war as a country, our pleasant situation changes very, very quickly because of interdependence. Wisdom serves us that we can have stability to get, both in pleasant situations because we don't have craving and attachment and we're not ensnared by desire for displeasure. At the same time, when difficulties arise, we understand that it's okay too, and we can navigate through both, hopefully without too much distortion in feeling, like hatred for difficulties and desire and craving and attachment for pleasure. We need to go through things with wisdom and deal with when difficult things arise. Today I have great health. I can run 20 miles. I feel great. But craving that and desiring that is useless in the face of you fall down, your leg breaks, we get older, our legs are feeble. We have to go through difficult and pleasant situations in a very kind of a similar way by understanding this is samsara, this is karma, this is interdependence, this is impermanence. We arm ourselves with those tools that allow us to look at whatever is transpiring without losing our mind. Mind is always lost. The stability of mind is always lost to emotions. When we start to be governed by hope, we are governed by attachment that easily turns into addiction. When we're governed by fear, we're just a step away from anger and hatred, because those are the subtle forms of those emotions. And all of it is based on ignorance. Wisdom, the opposite of ignorance, is knowing that good and bad things will transpire. My life will be filled with those and those kinds of things, and always operating from the place of liberating negativity and really working toward benefiting all mother sentient beings.
The Instagram account that I mentioned, Pamalotus and Jangchub Norbu, JANGCHUBNORBU. I was raised Christian but feel Christ is less and less part of the church. My view has been the teachings of Christ fit with the teachings of Buddhism. What are your thoughts on incorporating different religious practices? Well, I don't really see Buddhism as a religion, I'll be honest with you. Buddha is not a god, it's not a theistic religion. Buddhism ultimately doesn't look for some outer entity to that we are waiting to intervene in our lives, like an interventionist god that comes and does things for us. There are, Buddhism is really a contemplative practice, ultimately, in a way, because we're working with our own mind. And there are contemplative practices, we just heard this from a teaching by Alan Wallace, in the Christian tradition. So it's, I think learning meditation and practicing meditation really does fit into other religions, because if you're working with your mind to kind of overcome negative emotions, that can only help. All religions are ultimately about kindness, compassion, patience, and all those virtuous things. So meditation obviously is something that can help cultivate those things. So I would imagine meditation can fit quite easily with any other religious path. You quoted a teacher in Chicago. What's the name of the temple in Chicago, the Dharma Center?
No, the Dharma Center, I've never been there, but the organization is called Chicago Ratna, RATNA, Ratna Shri, SRI, Chicago Ratna Shri.
This is a good question, really good question. This is for you, Victoria, because you've been talking about this. it's challenging to detach from being fixed by the outer world while contending with serious health issues. I'm currently experiencing disabilitating mobility issues. How do we, and interacting with healthcare professionals frequently, how do we participate in our own health crisis with detachment?
Um, our teacher stresses very much the Tonglen practice. The Tonglen practice is whenever we're dealing with a crisis, first we need to have the view, right? We bring the view to mind. Our karma is our karma. We don't have to think of it as great or as horrible. It's somewhere in the middle, and we are usually faced with things that gazillions of other people are dealing with right at the same time. So in order to leave this kind of very small, tight, difficult place when we think on ourselves, and all kinds of things arise in us that are difficult to cope with, what we do is we engage the practice of Tonglen. We think on all the beings that are afflicted with the same situation that we're experiencing at the moment. There is never a situation that we are experiencing that someone else at the same time in this world is not experiencing alongside with us. So in order to expand that tight, difficult space, not just in order for that, but a huge relief that comes through the practice of Tonglen. What we do in practice of Tonglen, we visualize all those afflicted with the illness, such as ourselves. We visualize inhaling gray light or dark light from them. We bring it to our heart center, and at our heart center is a beautiful, vibrant sphere of light. As that gray light of suffering of these beings hits us, we exhale and send to them white, pure light of healing nature. And when we do that practice, it's not a conceptual thing. We're not thinking about it in our little thought bubbles. We're actually doing something. We are doing something energetically to change their situation. And while we're doing it for them, we are included. We are using our Buddha nature. We are using the best silent, conceptually silent parts of us that are vast and infinite and incredibly helpful. We do this visualization. The visualization always also counteracts our own suffering, because as we think about others, the sense of self becomes not as tight, not as small, not as painful. Our pain becomes, when we fuse it together with the pain of others, suddenly our pain is not as difficult as it is. And then when dealing with difficult medical professionals, please just remember, they also have Buddha nature just like us. At the same time, they also have deluded nature just like us, because we're here in this body that is the source of a lot of our suffering. The body's thirsty, the body's hungry, the body sleeps and doesn't sleep regularly, the body has illnesses. And so our mind has to go together with this vessel that's easily shattered and broken, or becomes out of balance, and that's what an illness is. And so have patience with them, understand that they are just like us, that they're made up of virtuous and unvirtuous elements at the same time, just like us. And remember, they have Buddha nature. Try to have kindness when you speak to them. And I can promise you, when we use better means to communicate with others, we can change their energy by simply becoming the source of a positive. We can influence what is out there as well. We're not doing it with calculated results in mind. We're just doing it because that is the right thing to do. It also alleviates a lot of our own suffering when, instead of communicating with others through anger and negativity, we communicate with them through positive, virtuous things. Now, the content of what we do sometimes we have to say very clearly, this is the situation and it has to be corrected. But when the source of that corrective speech or corrective behavior comes from something that's beneficial, that is virtuous, we can do whatever we need to do. We can accomplish all of our goals without being swept into anger, resentfulness, and self-pity, because those things for sure will steer us to nothing but like smashing the cliffs on the waves. So keeping that in mind, watching the mind, not suffering on top of the suffering that already exists in the body, not multiplying that suffering, not intensifying it, doing the Tonglen practice with those who are going through the same thing as we are going, and then expanding it to all beings, because there are no beings in this world who do not suffer. If we're here, we're in this body, we have afflictive emotions. With the exceptions of, that's why we go for authentic teachers and lineages, because our teachers are those that already have stability in liberation, and they have stability in the wisdom mind, and they can steer us and give us the right methods and steer us in the right direction toward our own liberation. But dealing with illness, deal with it, please deal with it in framework and mind of wisdom. Remember remember also that the illness is temporary. It is here now, and it will dissipate and disappear. Proceed and interact with people out of a place of benefiting them, out of a place of virtuous mind. And when you have a very strong pain, substitute it for strong practice of Tonglen. You can make it so that when pain arises, it's almost like an alarm going off for practice. And the more you do that, merge pain and practice at the same time, suffering and practice at the same time, at one point the practice will become the more dominant element. And instead of experiencing very, very strong pain, you may start to, and in short amount of time, you may start to experience the pleasure of practice, of benefiting others. And merging them together is a very, very skillful way of diminishing it for oneself, and also abiding in the nature of wisdom.
Okay, there's a lot of questions we didn't get to, so please, if you still want us to address them, you can email Michael Imperioli Meditation 101 at Gmail. Let's just dedicate the merit from today's session to the benefit of all beings by saying our dedication prayer. By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Thanks to Nick Solidago, our producer, for making this happen. We'll see you next week.